Welcome back, everyone. It's not every single day that we get to talk about a phone that really changed up the industry, and even though maybe it wasn't the first of its kind, it definitely was one of the most popular, and that phone is the Samsung Galaxy Fold, and there's just so much to unfold in this video. Guys, if I make another joke like that, please unsubscribe from my channel. But this phone was announced last year. It really wasn't released until a little bit later because it just had so many different issues with it, and the problem with this phone was I think it was just too ahead of its time. I just think people don't really need a phone like this. However, I have seen since a lot of people that actually have owned it and used it as a main phone, and I know these people personally, and they say that they have enjoyed this thing like crazy. They say they wish every single phone was like this. Now, me personally, I probably won't use a phone like this for a minute, but I do think that there is a huge market share for it, and this could be potentially like the main way a phone will look like in a couple years. Who knows? But like I said, I think this phone was just kind of ahead of its time by a little bit, but still, I think it brought a lot to the table that was really, really cool and really interesting. But I think there's two main gripes of this phone, and especially even now in 2020, the two main things are obviously the way it is. I don't know if there's a huge market share or market demand for a phone that looks like this, but the second thing was the price point of this phone. Now, when the Samsung Galaxy Fold came out last year, of course it came out and then it came out and then it came out again. And I think there was a lot of hype and build up about this phone the first time it came out, but then after it got released the second time, people were kind of bored of this phone and they didn't really like it. And the same thing kind of happened with the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip. There was a lot of hype around it before, but then after, nobody even talks about it anymore. And when I made those comparison videos, those really didn't get that many views, so I'm pretty sure there's not that many people who want to see a comparison between them. Versus my Samsung Galaxy S series review comparisons that came out after, and a lot more people want to see those, so I don't know, maybe there's something weird about it. But looking on the front of the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip, now there's the folded and the unfolded display. So when it's folded, you have a 4.6-inch Super AMOLED display. It is an HD display, so 720 by 1680, which is a 21:9 aspect ratio. And I think it's a pretty decent display. Obviously, that display has a ton of bezel on it, so there's really nothing to say about it there. Obviously, you saw the memes and everything. It looks just like the Nintendo DS. Now, unfolded, that's where you have that 7.3-inch dynamic AMOLED display. Now, this one is the foldable display, which is really, really cool. And you guys know the first time it came out, it had that little dust penetration thing. So if dust could come in, it would mess up the device, and sand would gripe up and all that. Really, really weird. I never really liked it. My Galaxy Fold that I had at the time, it didn't have any issues like that, luckily. But that doesn't mean you couldn't necessarily run into those. You have the USB Type-C port on the bottom, you have the triple camera setup on the back, and you have reverse wireless charging, and you have wireless charging, which is really cool on a foldable device. Now, I wanted to kind of brush over the rest of the device before I hit on the screen. Now, what I can tell you about the panel is that it is really, really cool how you can fit this big of a display into your pocket just by folding it. And I think something like that never gets old. That is something that is so underrated. Actually, it's not even that underrated because a lot of people talk about it, but that is something that is so cool. If you're playing a game or if you're typing something, if you're doing whatever, usually the typing thing isn't as cool as you might think because it's just kind of awkward. But if you're playing a game or something, that actually ends up being really, really cool. And it's just such a cool experience overall. And even now in 2020, there's really not that many phones that offer something crazy like that or who are pushing boundaries like that. And I really do applaud Samsung for doing that. Even though it might have flopped the first time, that doesn't mean in the future it cannot be a success, you know what I mean? Whenever I was playing a game on this thing, whenever I was doing anything, it really was a pretty good experience overall. And luckily for me, and surprisingly to me, I didn't think it was going to be that great. I didn't think it was going to be I thought I was just going to be complaining all the time, but that really wasn't the case. And I have a lot of respect for Samsung for engineering something like this. Now, unfortunately, there is no card slot on this thing, which kind of sucks. Is it a crazy deal? Not really. You have 512 gigabytes on this thing, which is, I think, good enough for a majority of people, including me. My iPhone 11 Pro has 64 gigabytes, but I think for the most part, 512 gigs is a lot for a lot of people, but it still would have been nice to have an SD card slot on this thing, considering the fact that this thing was almost $2,000 when it first came out. I think I paid about $1,500 for mine. which was still kind of a lot for a phone. However, on Amazon, you can pick one of these up for I think $1,400. So if you want to do that, that's a ton of money to spend, but that is quite a bit of money off compared to what we had before. So if you want to get one from there, I'll leave one link down below. But that really pretty much covers it up on the outside and the body. Now hitting on the software, this thing was released with Android Pie with One UI, thankfully. Now it is actually getting the Android 10 update or the One UI 2 update sometime today or maybe even tomorrow. At least it should have already gotten it by now. Now, I've already filmed the videos and everything, but what I can tell you is that One UI 2 isn't a crazy big update from One UI 1. The main changes that have happened are pretty much we're getting a system-wide dark mode that's actually pretty decent, and also the gesture-based design, which is really, really nice. So you can go swipe up and swipe sides, this side, and all that stuff. And I think that's a really, really cool thing. You know, I think that really adds so much of value to a phone. And when I added it, when I had One UI 2 on my Samsung Galaxy S9, I was like, wow, this phone feels like a brand new phone. I was sick and tired of clicking the buttons all the time. I didn't want to do that stuff anymore. And that actually really, really surprised me, how great of an experience and how just, you know, it can just breathe new life into your device. Now with the Samsung Galaxy Fold, it sits in a unique position because there's really no other phones that look like it or feel like it, and adding those gestures on it might be a little bit weird actually, because, you know, the screen is just so wide, so you kind of have to go like kind of adjust it accordingly. I'm not too sure how the gestures will work, but you'll still have a better experience on that in my opinion than not having it. So One UI 2 will be a pretty big update and a notable update coming from One UI 1 for sure, and it's probably going to get another update on top of that, so it's definitely not going to stop there. Hopefully it gets another 2 updates because people are spending so much money on this thing that it deserves another update, but that's really pretty much it in terms of that. Now hitting on the performance standpoint, this thing has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 chipset, an octa-core CPU, an Adreno 640 GPU. Like I said before, only one model of this thing, the 512 gig model, but it does have 12 gigabytes of RAM, which is a ton of RAM, kind of, at least at the time it was, but even now, all the Galaxy S series devices, the S20s, the S20 Pluses, all have 12 gigabytes of RAM, which is a lot for a majority of people. I have 4 gigs of RAM on my 11 Pro, which isn't the same thing, but I've had 8 gigs on my S10, and that seemed to be running perfectly fine for the most part. So 12 on this device is really, really good. And in terms of the performance, I mean, I can tell you, I mean, what can I tell you? How can I tell you that this phone is a very good performing phone? Really, whatever you're going to do with it, for the most part, it'll get you from point A to point B and to all the way to point Z. There's really nothing inside of me that makes me think that this is a bad performing device. Maybe the only slight thing, I can't even think of anything bad. I didn't really run into too many issues. Maybe the only thing is that when you unfold it and you know, if you're using an app on your main display and you unfold it, sometimes it would be a little bit disproportionate, or maybe it would take me back to the home screen by accident. Sometimes maybe I was clicking a button, but that very rarely happened, and that doesn't have too much to do with performance. But I think overall the performance was very, very good on this phone, and really whatever you're going to do with it, I don't know how practical it's going to be if you're going to, you know, be doing crazy things. But what I can say is if you're a business professional, if you're a worker or a student or whatever, if you're typing out papers, if you're doing whatever, I think it would be really cool if you had a bigger display, and this phone offers it. And with all that RAM, you can have a bunch of apps in the background, or you can be multitasking and doing all crazy things like that. What I will say though is that if this phone had an S Pen, I think that would have brought this phone to a whole different level. Obviously it's not a Note device, but I think that would have been a really cool thing if they were able to do that. So in terms of performance, it definitely gets a thumbs up in my books. Now hitting on the cameras, like I said before, this thing has a triple camera setup on the back, a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, then a 16 megapixel ultra wide sensor. Now what's really cool about this lens is that we have a triple camera setup that I really do like. We can do 4K 60 frames, which is really cool, 1080p at 240, and the camera is really, really good. And what's really, really cool about this phone is that if you're taking a photo or video or whatever, because the screen is so big and there's very little bezel on it, it just seems like it's almost like you're just looking through like the glass or something like that. Versus on a phone, you're kind of used to seeing it like that, but on a big screen like this, it's a little bit different. It's the same thing if you have like an iPad Pro, like the new one with the bezel-less design, or almost bezel-less. It kind of looks like the same thing, which is really, really cool. So the back camera gets a thumbs up from my books. Now when you unfold it, you have a 10 megapixel and 8 megapixel camera inside of it, and those cameras are really, really good. They're both wide angle lenses, but they're still extremely fine. Now when you fold it, you have another 10 megapixel camera on the back, on the front of it as well. So you have 6 cameras on this thing altogether, which is crazy, and all those cameras are really, really good at the end of the day. Now ending it off with the battery life, this thing has a 4,380 milliamp hour battery, which is a very big size battery to have in a phone like this. Now I think the Samsung Galaxy S20 has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, so this one surprisingly is just a little bit bigger than that, even though this phone is much bigger. But it was weird though, because this thing had a foldable battery inside of it, so it was battery I think broken down in 2 parts, and they connected it somewhere and went from there. So I think overall this phone definitely has a pretty good battery life, but like I said, it also has reverse wireless charging and all that crazy stuff. So in my opinion, battery life is a thumbs up in my books too. Now, to kind of sum up this video, I would say this phone is the future of phones. This phone is a great phone still in 2020. There's really not too much to hate on it. It's a really good phone. And if Apple made a phone like this, I think I would probably end up using it just because of that bigger display when you unfold it. Now, if Apple software was, giving us the ability to multitask and split screen multitasking and all that stuff, then I would 100% take use of that. But because they don't, it seems kind of useless now because you can only use one app on the screen. But with the Galaxy Fold, you have that ability with that software to split screen multitask and have one app open on one side and another one open on the other side. And bigger screens are always better, in my opinion, for the majority of people. So in that sense, I would 100% recommend, dude, if you need a phone, if you're in the market, get a Samsung Galaxy Fold. It's a very expensive phone, but it will probably end up lasting you longer than you might think. And I think the features and the hardware and just the technology within this phone will just leave you in awe. And a lot of people will end up giving you a lot of attention if you're into that. If you pull out a folding phone, people are not used to that yet. So like I said, if you want to pick one up, links will be down in the description below. But that's pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those things are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.